So, what was it like growing up in Romania?
I I lived in Romania till I was 5, at which point we came to America. But in those 5 first years, I understand it was really basic and a poor existence. Romania was still under communist rule at the time, Ceausescu being the president. And so I heard stories of my brother having to go stand in bread lines all day long to get the daily rations that the people would get from the uh, regime. And some days he wouldn't get any bread. He would stand there all day and still come back home and have to get back in line the next day. So it was pretty poor, but I guess the people got by the best way they can. Most folks have their own garden and, some a little bit poultry, maybe some chickens and ducks and sheep. So, but growing up there, the schools were all just state-run schools. So I was very young still, so I don't have much recollection of that. I just have a few pictures, but the memories I do have typically involve just walking down uh, country roads from one place to another, or coming across a flock of geese or a herd of sheep. So those are my strongest memories when I was a child. And we I remember even as a 5-year-old hearing stories of America and uh, one day maybe going there and such. So
What was the transition like moving from Romania to America?
yes, so it wasn't your typical, hey, let's move out of country and let's go live somewhere else type deal. Because, again, in the communist type regime, the way they did it, you weren't allowed to leave, as you can see the case in other countries. They make it hard to leave, and sometimes they do it through violence. And uh, Romania, the border between Romania and Hungary was a guarded border, and that's was a path that a lot of people were going towards, getting away from Russia and going back to the West. So we got out in a roundabout way because my dad, he a couple of years in 1981, he decided that he was going to leave and try to find a better life for us. So in the dead of night, the story goes that it was a rainy and very stormy night, so it would provide for protection for his escape. He attempted and did ultimately cross the border, but it wasn't without having to outrun some guards and their dogs and kind of wheedle through the border without getting caught. And he did actually get to the other side. I was trying to remember a little bit more of the story. If I don't know if he got shot at or he got chased down, but he made it to Hungary and he stayed there for a couple years in a refugee camp. I'm sorry, maybe 1 year. So he stayed in a refugee camp. They caught him on the Hungary side and they were going to send him back, but he did a hunger strike where he didn't eat for a couple of weeks and claimed political asylum. And at that point, he was able to just be put into the refugee camp. Uh, After some time, we were sponsored by a church in Kentucky, which church of some Christian church in Kentucky put up the money to bring him to America, and as a refugee, and he stayed in America for about a year and kind of was working and getting assimilated to the new world. And back, and then in '83, they were able to sponsor us and get all the paperwork put together and get us the visas that we needed. So therefore, we were able to come to America because he was, able to be sponsored and have the money put up for by this church. Uh, so in the time leading up to that, we knew as kids that he was gone, and we would talk about him being in America. At the time, we didn't realize he was still in the refugee camp. But so we had a sense of expectation and anticipation of one day being liberated from the communist rule and going to the land of freedom, which was America. So we got to live that dream that a lot of people do, and experienced it. It was very exciting. We finally got our tickets. We got some airplane tickets and we boarded, and we were able to kind of just come to America, and without a little bit of fanfare. We had a layover and we changed planes in Switzerland, which back in the day, you got off the airplane and you walked down the steps from the airplane into the tarmac, and then a bus would take you from the tarmac to the airport. And some countries still do that, like in St. Martin and stuff. So in that transition, we got kind of split up, and for some reason, I walked off to a different bus and got on the wrong bus to take me to some other part of the airport. And last minute, it said that my brother Ben ran and grabbed me out of that bus before it took off and brought me back to where my mom was actually supposed to be. And that's always a story that we kind of shared. That one time I almost got lost in Switzerland. So my mom definitely had her hands full, and so that was in '83. We immigrated here to America in that fashion. I think our first point of residence location where we lived was Kentucky, Paducah, Kentucky, and that's where we stayed for about a year. So that's how it kind of went about, just by the grace of God and being able to get in touch with a group of people that put up the money and sponsored us. So once we got to America, we lived in Paducah, Kentucky, which was quite beautiful. But my dad, being that he was had a free spirit and a traveling spirit, or the spirit of discovery, if you will. He was adventurous too, be that he made the trek to get out of Romania. Took a lot of courage and just fortitude. But once we got here to America, he did move around quite a bit, just kind of exploring the rest of America. And I know that we lived in Georgia for a little bit, and then we also lived in North Carolina, and these were all 6 to 12 month stints. And then we ended up living in Chicago for about half a year. That was wild. I do have some memories of that because it was your typical overpopulated monster apartment buildings that I remember just walking past, and it was, even as a child, I realized the violence and like the edginess of the inner city, if you will. So we didn't stay there long. There was quite some violence that we saw just in the time that we were there. But we moved on to California eventually, and in California we stayed in about 4 or 5 different places. We started in San Bernardino, and San Leandro was out there, and we lived in we ended up moving to Modesto, California. It was just north of San Jose and Sacramento, and that's where we stayed for about 4 or 5 years, at which point in that time we were able to become naturalized citizens, and my parents became citizens of America, which was good. It automatically brought that citizenship to all the children. But in that process, my dad took our last name, which is Creanga, and that means branch in Romanian. He had it translated to English, and that's how we got the branch as the last name. So, but you pronounce it Creanga. But so that was a fun thing. It kind of took away that stigma of being an immigrant. And my dad, after a while, didn't want to be so much out of country, but just part of the American populace, and which is not bad. And that's how we move forward with that. And that was in '93, I believe, or '91. But Modesto, California was quite beautiful, and it was very nice. We went to school there and enjoyed all the different things. We traveled to Santa Cruz quite a bit, to the ocean, and that was fun. There's actually quite a large Romanian community in San Leandro, which we would go to and visit quite often, and it was very pretty. And one thing my dad did do quite a bit was drive around all over the country, so we got to do quite a bunch of road trips and kind of became fond of just driving, and like all people, who doesn't enjoy a good road trip. So got to see a lot of the country, and we went up to Yosemite National Park and Lake Tahoe, and we saw the Sequoia National Forest. We actually, as children, drove and took a bunch of pictures through that tree that used to be very famous, where you could drive right through it and such. But I hear it burned down a few years ago. So, you know, but that was really nice, and that was kind of our general uh, years of the first 4, 5, 6 years of being in America. And I remember when I first started school in Modesto, I still hadn't really learned much English, and I don't know where I went to school first, but I had to go to school with cue cards because my English was so lacking that uh, the cue cards just read, can I go to the bathroom, or I need to talk to my mom and dad, or I have something wrong. But it was quite interesting being in the school system without understanding none of the people. And
Well, thank you so much for telling us your story.
you're welcome, and thank you for listening.
We'll do one more take real quick.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me and letting me share my history with you.